Thank God for Thursday night. I was ready to come out here today and just tear into this hockey team. I even had 2 bits planned. Guess I'll just tuck those in my back pocket and keep them for later. Seriously though, it was another pretty awful week for the Sens. They were just able to close it out on a bit of a high note this time. And like I said, thank God for that. Let's just get into it. How are the young guys now? I finally did it! I scored again! Quit taking penalties! The Sens are gonna blow this game! Way to tie up the stick in front. Not. Well done. Just well done. You better believe we're gonna be having a penalty chat at the end of this one. What a time to be alive! What a long and brutal season that was. This team, man! The first game of the week might have been their worst as well. The Sens come out against an Oilers team they haven't lost to in Edmonton in 7 years, and they absolutely come unglued in the first period. They give up 5 early goals, they're down 5-1 early, they then take advantage of a pretty bad AHL goaltender, start to at least kind of make the game interesting, and end up losing 8-5. And that brings me to what I liked from this contest. Well, the easiest and most obvious thing that I liked was the fact that the game finally ended. Now seriously, this game could have got real ugly after the Oilers took a 5-1 first period lead, but the Sens were able to at least kind of push back a little and make it somewhat of a game. They could have rolled over and died and lost like 10-11-1, and they didn't. And that's what I liked. Yeah, Stuart Skinner was a big help for the Sens as he gave up some pretty awful goals. But the Sens at least made an attempt to score some goals. They could have rolled over and died, and they didn't do that. Obviously, their start to the game was not very good, but at least they kind of pushed back after that. And that's what I liked. And that brings me to what I didn't like. The Sens' goaltending in this game was horrendous. It may not necessarily be entirely fair to blame the goaltending for this contest, but it was just awful. You can make excuses for them on most of the goals. The first goal was a bad bounce. The second goal, nobody defended. The third goal is a partial screen. There's no defending the fourth goal. There's really not much defending the fifth goal. But at some point, you've got to get a save. Like the Sens give up a couple early goals. At least Colin White scores to make it 2-1. And then that partial screen goes in and it's like, man, can we not get a save somewhere? And then that fourth goal goes in and I don't even want to talk about it. I think I could have saved that. And I'm no goalie. That's a big reason why the Sens lost. They couldn't get a save to save their life. And that's what I didn't like from this contest. Their goaltending was horrendous. Unfortunately, that brings me to game number 2, where, yeah, things weren't much better in that department. The Oilers score 3 times in the first period, add another one early in the second, jump out to a 4-0 lead. The Sens try to make a game of it, score a couple goals, including one in the final 30 seconds, and fall 4-2. And that brings me to what I liked from this contest. While the Sens fell behind 4-0 in this game, their compete level actually wasn't that awful. The game ended with the shots 25-25, and if you take the first period out of this, the Sens actually won the game 2-1. They threw 31 hits, turned the puck over 7 fewer times than the Oilers did, and just generally competed pretty solidly. Unfortunately, the goaltending really let them down again, and that was a big difference in this contest. So while I liked their compete, I didn't like their start. The Sens managed just 4 first period shots and gave up 3 first period goals. That's hardly a recipe for success. Compound that by the fact that the Sens are in the midst of a very long losing streak, and they've spent a lot of time recently fighting from behind for most of the game, and things are just going to get out of control. Unfortunately, their goaltending wasn't very good, and they didn't do a great job in front of their goaltending in the first period either, and it hurt them, as they were never able to climb out of a 3-0 hole. And speaking of climbing out of an early hole, that brings me to the very next game. The Sens give up the first goal of the game just past the midway mark of the first period. They score 2 times in 18 seconds in the final minute of the first. Connor Brown adds another in the second period. The Sens take a 3-1 lead and hang on for a 3-2 win. And for the first time in 87 years, the Sens won a game! So that brings me to what I liked from this contest. There was a lot to like from the Sens in this game, but I'm going to pick out something that maybe not a lot of people noticed, and something that was a little more subtle, but I think very, very important to this team's success. One of the things the Sens did this summer was they went out and they got very big physical defensemen, adding Josh Brown, Eric Goodbranson, and Braden Coburn. Unfortunately, adding those three took away from the Sens' ability to move the puck from their defense to their forward and get it out of the zone. After getting hammered by the Oilers, the Sens might have actually started to realize that that was hindering them, as they placed Braden Coburn on waivers, called Eric Brandstrom up to the taxi squad. Then when Coburn cleared waivers, they moved Coburn down to the taxi squad, brought Brandstrom up to the main roster, and inserted Brandstrom into this game. I thought that made a terrific difference for the Sens, as it gave them a puck mover in Mike Riley, a puck mover in Eric Brandstrom, and a puck mover on Thomas Chabot on each of their three defensive pairings. And I thought one of the best things the Sens did last night was move the puck out of their zone from their defense. Montreal would bring the puck in, and in a lot of cases, Ottawa's defense would get it, quickly move it up the boards, and boom, out of the zone the Sens go. A lot of times this season, the Sens have been trapped in their defensive zone because they just haven't been able to move the puck out of their end. In this game, they did a much better job of that, and it gave them a much better result. And that brings me to what I didn't like from this contest. The Sens were outshot 18-5 in the third period, so while it would be pretty easy to just point to the third period as a whole and say, I didn't like that, I'm going to more specifically point to their discipline in the third period as what I didn't like. You know, down 3-1 going to the third period, the Habs are going to push back, so I'm okay with the Sens being outshot 18-5. The part I have a problem with is the 2 minor penalties the Sens took in about a 2.5 minute span. The last thing the Sens need to do when they're nursing a lead in the third period is give the other team power play opportunities, and twice the Sens did that in the third. Yes, credit the Sens PK for killing them off, but you keep giving a team power plays, and even if they don't score, you're probably going to give them the momentum. You give them the momentum, they start to come back, and look at the last few minutes, the Habs get a goal, and all of a sudden that comfortable Sens lead is now a nail-biter. Now, admittedly, the Habs had their own discipline problems down the stretch, as they took 2 penalties in the final 4 minutes, resulting in a Sens 5-on-3 that effectively just wiped out the rest of the game. But the Sens can't rely on the other team to have discipline issues as well. They need to worry about their own discipline problems. They hung on, so I'll take it, but I'd like to see them take a few less penalties in the third with the lead. Well, actually, just in general. And that leads me to my 3 stars of the week. And that leads me to star number 3. This guy has barely seen the ice at all this season for the Sens, and maybe that's why he's my 3rd star this week, because I hadn't seen him, and honestly, I didn't know what to expect. But I thought this guy had a pretty good week, and so my 3rd star for this week is Ottawa Senators defenseman Artem Zub. Zub came into this season as a KHL signing for the Sens, and he was a bit of a question mark. I had no idea how much he was going to play, how good he was going to look, and what kind of a style we could actually expect him to play under DJ Smith. But honestly, in that Edmonton game, and then against Montreal, I thought he looked real solid. He made a couple of nice plays, and didn't get victimized too badly defensively. And so this guy deserves some credit, as Artem Zub is star number 3. And now we go to star number 2. This guy hasn't lit it up offensively yet this year, but he finished this week with a goal and an assist, and I thought he could have had a couple more points, was real solid at times this week, and star number 2 is Drake Batherson. Again, Batherson didn't tear it up offensively this week, but he did have a goal and an assist. I thought he could have had another goal in the second game against Edmonton, and he was just generally playing pretty solid at times. He's much more confident with the puck, and he seems bigger and more strong when he has the puck, and he's just looked pretty solid for most of this season, and he was pretty good this week. So star number 2 is Ottawa Senators forward Drake Batherson. And that brings me to star number 1. And I'd say it's pretty obvious who star number 1 is this week. Number 2 and number 3 were a little more difficult for me to pick, but star number 1 was very easy. And this week's number 1 star is Ottawa Senators stud Tim Stützle. Stützle finished the week with a goal in each game and had a goal and 2 assists in the finale of the week against the Habs. He had 5 points in 3 games, was Ottawa's best player of the week by far, and just seemed to dominate at times. Being a young kid, it was going to take him some time to work his way into the lineup and get more comfortable. I think we're starting to see that now with Stützle, and he had a really solid week. Of all the plays Stützle made this week, and he made a bunch, I think the biggest play and the best one he made of the week was actually one where he got a secondary assist on a Thomas Chabot goal. That stretch pass from his own zone all the way up to the far blue line to Chris Tierney, which then sprung Chabot for the easy snipe off the post and in, was just a thing of beauty. That's something that the Sens usually get burned on, but not something they take advantage of, is those stretch passes with the other team making a change. Stützle did that on this play, and I think we could see him making that play a lot more in the future. And so for that play and every other one he made this week, the number 1 star for the Ottawa Senators this week is forward Tim Stützle. So a real quick recap on the 3 stars for the Sens. Artem Zub is star number 3, Drake Batherson is star number 2, and Tim Stützle is star number 1. And that brings me to my most disappointing player of the week. And Ottawa's most disappointing player of this week is goaltender Marcus Högberg. Högberg wrapped up the week with a pretty tough effort, as he gave up 9 goals on 47 shots and was just plainly not good. With the Sens trying to make a comeback against a pretty lousy AHL goaltender in the first game against Edmonton, Högberg gave them nothing and allowed them 0 opportunity to come back in this contest. And then the second game of the week was even worse. The Sens come out and are at least pretty decent, and he just can't even make a save in the first period. And by the time the period's over, the deficit is so big the Sens have no chance of coming back. So this week's most disappointing player for the Sens is goaltender Marcus Högberg. And that brings me to the next week for the Sens. The Sens play 4 times this week as they host Montreal later this afternoon. Then they host Edmonton Monday, Edmonton Tuesday, and they're in Winnipeg on Thursday. And this week could be pretty rough for the Sens, as they play Montreal in the first game. And while they did just beat Montreal, they are coming home after a lengthy road trip, and those usually go pretty poorly for the home team. So they get that one out of the way, and it probably doesn't go well. Then they get Edmonton twice, and Edmonton just finished beating Ottawa 12-7 in a pair of wins in Edmonton. And with Draisaitl and McDavid running roughshod over the NHL so far this season, those games aren't probably going to go too well either. And that brings me to the final game of the week against Winnipeg. Well, the Sens are 0-3 against Winnipeg so far this season. They were outscored 14-7 in those games. And to make matters worse, the Sens have lost 5 in a row to Winnipeg. They've been outscored 24-10 in that span. If the Sens can get 1 win this week, that's probably a success, but I'm going to make things a little more greedy. I'm going to ask for 3 points. Get one of these games to overtime that you lose, please. That does it for this video. Hit like if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, share it with anybody you know, and tell me, do you agree with my picks for this week's most disappointing player, for the 3 stars, what I liked and didn't like in the games? Let me know down below. And give me your prediction for what you think the Sens are going to do in the next week. Will they get 2 points? Will they get 3? Will they somehow sweep the week? Let me know down below, and we'll see you next Saturday after the Sens play 4 times, 3 of them at home this time.